British police have arrested two men suspected of setting fire to a mosque in eastern England. It's the latest in a series of hate crimes across the country, sparked by the brutal killing of a British soldier in London by self-proclaimed defenders of Muslims. The surge of Islamophobia has some concern that society is about to split, as RT's Polly Boyko reports.
The police investigation into the death of drummer Lee Rigby is still ongoing, but last week's killing of the off-duty soldier by Islamic extremists has already provoked an anti-Muslim backlash. Religious charity Faith Matters say they used to receive 5 calls a day reporting racial abuse. That figure is now up to over 100 calls a day reporting anti-Muslim incidents. The abuse includes the pulling off of women's headscarves, attacks against mosques, anti-Muslim graffiti and general abuse. Social media has also provided a platform for some to vent their anti-Islamic sentiments. A number of arrests have already been made. The news has left many Muslims here saying that they're afraid to leave their houses, while community leaders say that they're concerned about the spread of the incidents, with reports of anti-Muslim abuse coming from across the entire country. At the same time, a new poll says that 2/3 of people living in the UK believe that there will be a clash of the civilizations between white Britons and British Muslims, something that could be increasingly threatening to Britain's image of multiculturalism and ethnic diversity. Polly Boyko, RT, London.
Well, for more, let's now cross to investigative journalist Tony Gosling. He's there in the UK. Tony, we've seen extremist groups like the English Defence League react, but are we now at a point where we're seeing tolerant, moderate people now turning against their Muslim neighbours?
Yes, well, this seems to be happening, doesn't it? It's extremely worrying, but let's not forget the Western intelligence services have been involved in criminal acts in the past which have actually fueled this kind of sectarian violence, which seems to be beginning again here in Britain. I mean, there's some serious questions that MI5 have got to answer about what happened last week in London in Woolwich. I mean, first of all, obviously, you know, the condolences go to Lee Rigby's family, and the horrendous part of all of that is that how did these guys, who were right at the very top of the terror watch list, they're ex-Al Majroon people, how on earth did they not get spotted preparing for some kind of terror act? Was the car bugged, for example? This is one question that hasn't been answered. MI5 have gone very quiet on all these kinds of topics. How did they get ammunition? How did they get a revolver? Had they been following Lee? These kinds of questions. I mean, they've got something like 4,000 staff, MI5, and if they can't keep an eye on the people who are at the very top of the watch list, then there needs to be a real shake-up, and heads need to roll there.
And the UK Home Secretary, though, has said there needs now to be a look at the Communications Data Act. Stronger powers of surveillance. That is necessary now, isn't it? Because if you did have those stronger powers of surveillance, then those guys may not have slipped through the net.
Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? No, I don't think this is the right thing to be doing at all. We need to actually have a look at who is to blame here. MI5's job is to stop people like this committing acts like this, and they haven't done it. And this isn't the first time. If we go back to the London bombings of 2005, you might remember that MI5 had been following these guys around as well. Now, all fair play to them if they can stop some plots taking place, but these guys were really at the top of the list, and if they can't stop these people, then what are they there for? You go back even to the 90s and the Bishopsgate bomb. We now know that MI5 were following the IRA around for days and in the months with this bomb beforehand, and yet still allowed them to blow it up. So you know, the oversight of the security services really needs to be looked at, and I think we need to have some serious changes in the way it runs. The other thing is the oversight. MPs don't oversee MI5 and MI6. It's actually civil servants that do, and they are then overseen by a handful of MPs, including what I would suggest are rather lightweight MPs, pro-establishment is what I mean, like Hazel Blears and Malcolm Rifkin and people like this. You know, so there isn't any proper oversight, and what these intelligence services seem to do every time is to hide behind the veil of national security. We can't tell you what's going on. Even the inquiry that's been instituted into the failures of what happened last Wednesday is going to be kept entirely secret, and I'm afraid it's time for them to come out from under their shells and get a proper looking at, so that this kind of thing really can't happen again. And they're not going to play this game, I can assure you, of saying we need more money, we need more power, and we need more surveillance of the general population, because they had all the laws they needed to stop these people doing what they did last Wednesday. They don't need any more power whatsoever.
But the government is doing something by setting up a new terrorism task force to target hate preachers and extremism. Now, doing that, wouldn't that stop that sort of violent act?
Well, I actually don't think so. I think one of the things which would stop it is William Hague pursuing this foreign policy which bears no relevance to what the British people actually want. It's not in our interests to be trying to arm al-Qaeda in Syria, as he's been trying to do today over in Brussels. Thankfully, most of the rest of Europe thinks it's a ridiculous concept and is not going to let him do it. But we need to have politicians that actually represent what we say rather than business interests. Let's not forget, back in the 1990s, MI5 was actually courting business interests, saying, would you like HSBC, would you like us to come and spy for you, to give you information from our files? They were also saying the same to BAE Systems, one of the biggest arms manufacturers in the world. And I'm afraid this is an MI5 that's completely out of control. They just seem to do what they want, and there's no proper oversight of our security services. And once you get that sort of situation, then you've got the possibility of all sorts of things going on illegally. I mean, for example, we had this interview that was done on the BBC last Friday evening, where the chap, as he's being interviewed, special branch turn up at the BBC and arrest him as soon as he's coming out. Now, you can't just arrest people for telling what their own version, friends of terrorists, about various stories to do with, for example, this chap that committed this act, it looks like, last Wednesday, having been tortured and attempted to be recruited by MI5. The public needs to know these things, and we, as parliamentarians as well, need to know these things if they're going to have any proper oversight of our security services. And we really need to do that, I think, Bill, if we're going to have any kind of real anti-terror operation in this country. We need to have an accountable security services. At the moment, we don't have at all.
And does this draw attention to the public on Britain's foreign policy? In what way could this have an impact on future military engagements in Muslim countries?
Well, it doesn't just have an impact on the Islamic community, I can assure you that. Many people in this country are unhappy about, I mean, look, for example, what we've done to Iraq, an illegal war. Now we've had another bomb attack today with 50 people killed, something over 100 people injured today. We've made a mess and a wreck of these places. The Arab League's prediction that we were going to open the gates of hell in Iraq has come true. And actually Britain and Tony Blair at the time, obviously George Bush too, are responsible for this. So it's not just the Muslim population that are angry. The other thing is we've got other extremists here in Britain. That is to say, you know, sort of anti-Islamic extremists. 2 weeks ago, a man, a pensioner coming home from his mosque in Birmingham, in the Midlands of Britain, was murdered. And this got almost no coverage whatsoever. And we need to make sure that the security services are taking exactly the same sort of measures against the anti-Muslim, like the English Defence League, these kinds of organisations, as they are against the Islamic organisations. And one thing that I've noticed today in the press here they're trying to do is to close down, or at least possibly ban, Hizb ut-Tahrir, which is does not advocate violence at all. I mean, this is ridiculous. What they're trying to do is actually demonise Muslims in a similar way to the Nazis demonised Jews back in the 1930s, and it's ridiculous. We've got to stop that. We don't want that from MI5. Thank you very much.
Investigative journalist Tony Gosling, live there in the UK. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts.